Hi, this is Tanya Becker, and I'm your host for today's episode of PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating. If you haven't already, please subscribe to PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Ryan Kirkpatrick, a sales manager with Precision Sonar, is here with me today. Precision Sonar sells a variety of mounting systems for boats and a number of other interesting products. But today we're going to talk about a fascinating solution called the Leash. At PartsVu, we all love boating, but boating can be dangerous, and even the most seasoned boaters can have problems out there. The Leash is a patented solution engineered to reduce the risk of an outboard motor flipping into the cockpit in the event of an underwater collision with a submerged object. Thanks so much for being here, Ryan.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to talking a little bit today.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, could you just start by explaining what the Leash is and why it's so important for safe boating?
So the Leash is a patented product that it goes around the back of the outboard motor and attaches to the boat, whether it attaches to the jack plate or transom, either way. And what it does is it prevents the motor from flipping up in the case that you were to hit something under the water, whether that be a stump or old house foundation or flooded bridge that's still under the water, or roadbed, even just floating debris going down the middle of the water in the middle of a river channel or something like that. You could be in 60 foot of water and have something floating down the river channel and hit that and take a good day into a bad day real quick.
Absolutely. Good. So, are there certain types of boaters who are more prone to accidents where the outboard might flip up and this kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple different people that are going to run into that issue, and so oftentimes it's tournament fishermen. Tournament fishermen, they want to go fast and they want to get to their spot first. They want to maximize their time on the water, so they're going faster than most of your other boaters. We've got bass boats that on average are running 65 to 75 miles an hour, some even higher than that. So obviously, when you're running faster down the lake, you're going to be more susceptible to this happening. However, there is also a different group of people that run into this issue, and it's people that don't get out on the water near as much. They're not as familiar with the water, so they don't know where those stumps are. They don't know where the high spots are. A lot of people have the misconception that if there's water, you go. And especially down in the southeast states, we've got a lot of man-made reservoirs. That's not the case. Like here on Kentucky Lake, where we live, the further out in the middle is actually the shallowest part of our lake. So you could be running right across the middle of the lake and be in 20 foot of water and go to 2 foot of water just like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd imagine also people, water sports people, right? People, ski boats, that kind of thing can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And obviously, they're cruising around, and oftentimes you've got tubers or skiers or something like that behind you, and you're not paying 100% attention to what's in front of you, where you're going. You're focused on that person behind you, making sure they're all right, still up, all that. So a lot of times, if you just get right outside of that channel, you could be in trouble real quick.
Yeah. I wanted just to circle back for a second, because some of this is obvious, right? But before we met you, and became familiar with the Leash as a product, I really hadn't thought through this outboard flipping up into the boat issue.
Yeah.
And I have a hunch a lot of people haven't.
Yeah.
So can you just explain the physics? Like, say, I'm cruising along, I hit a stump or something submerged, what can happen?
Absolutely.
Physics. Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things that have to happen in order for the Leash to come into play. So the first thing, the most common thing that we see happening is if someone's driving down the lake, they hit something underneath the water, the motor is going to fly up, the piston is going to go out, it's going to give out, and then the motor bracket, that's where we see most accidents happen. Is the motor bracket will actually break right at the bend where it kind of goes around the back of the transom or the jack plate. So that's actually probably the weakest point of the motor. And most of the motor manufacturers rate that bracket up to 45 miles an hour. So that's all well and good under 45 miles an hour. But most of our bass boats, especially, like I said, they're going 65 to 75 miles an hour. And even if they're just cruising around, most of them are going 45 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, or whatever, right at that same breaking point, essentially. So that's where we have the leash come in, is when all that stuff fails, that's when the leash will take control and keep that motor down in the water.
That's interesting. I had no idea those mounting brackets were only rated generally up to 40 miles an hour or so.
Yep.
I have a feeling that plenty of other people didn't know that either.
Well, and that's the thing. So in most of the owner manuals, when you get a motor, most of the owner's manuals have a warning in there saying, hey, the outboard can flip into your boat if you were to strike something underneath the water. So that's where, as humans, we don't read through the whole entire manual. We don't know that that's an issue, but obviously the motor manufacturers know that is an issue because they're putting it in their owner manuals.
Right. Yes. We should all read the owner's manuals in a detailed fashion. However, that's a public service announcement, but do we?Maybe not.
Yeah. We like to skip through the bullet points.
Exactly. Are there stories that you can share of accident outcomes where the leash was installed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just kind of circle back to that in just a second. So going to when I first started working for Precision Sonar and when we first started selling the leash, I didn't have one on my boat. Mm-hmm. Not that I didn't believe in it or anything like that. It wasn't a necessity to me to have it on my boat. And then once we started selling it, and I started talking to all these people and hearing all these stories of it's happened to them or it's happened to their fishing partner or their buddy or whatever, that's when everything started clicking with me. And it was like, man, this happens. And some of these people are super experienced, been tournament fishing for their whole entire life, been fishing that body of water their whole entire life. So if it can happen to them, it certainly can happen to me. And having other people in the boat, whether it be my wife or whoever's with me, I don't want to have that happen. So some of the stories that I've heard, one that really got to me was a guy called me it was either last year or year before, and it was on a Friday morning. I'll never forget it. And he said, he goes, well, I need to buy a leash. I said, okay, no problem. We'll get you set up. He said, well, I have to tell you a story. He said, last night, my brother and I were fishing a Thursday night local tournament, and we were just about to run in, and we saw a boat cut across the flat heading back to weigh in. And when he did, they heard a loud noise, and then they heard someone start screaming. So they went over there to the boat. And he said, fortunately, my brother's a paramedic. He knew what to do. But when they got up to the boat, the motor had flipped up inside the boat, and it had the prop was still spinning, of course. And as the motor was flipping into the boat, the prop cut the guy all the way from his shoulder all the way down his leg. And when they got up to him, half of his lung was sticking out of his rib cage.
Oh, God.
So, I mean, it can happen to anybody. And like I said, that guy may have had the winning bag of fish, headed back to weigh-in, thought everything was great, and everything went south so quickly. So there's Rex Chambers. He was a big proponent of the leash. He passed away a few years ago, but before he actually had this happen to him, and the motor flipped up, and he had prop marks going all the way down his legs. It was just a perfect where you could see the ear of the prop going all the way down his leg. Had to spend some time in the hospital. And last year there was a accident. I think it was on Santee Cooper Lakes down South Carolina, Georgia area. And a guy ended up in the hospital in ICU because of this happening. So it happens all the time. And, in a perfect world, your lower unit shears off and you have to get a new lower unit. But you and I both know we don't live in a perfect world. So stuff happens to even the most responsible and the most experienced boaters. It happens all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the key. I mean, it's easy to say I've been boating my whole life. I know what I'm doing, which, plenty of people out there do. And plenty of folks that'll be listening to this. They're highly experienced, but it's just, as you said, I mean, these things can happen to anyone. It's, the other thing that scares me too is we were talking about tubing and, water skiing, water sports kind of stuff. There's so often when, a family's out, the kids, kind of sometimes, you want them off of the bow, like hanging off of,
Yeah.
so you stick them back, stick them back in the back, and they're kind of in the direct line of fire if something were to happen
Absolutely.
to that outboard,
Well, and that's the thing. So most of the accidents that happen in this, like this, the motor will end up going towards the passenger seat. The reason why that happens is because of the rotation of the prop. The prop is still spinning at 5,500 to 6,000 RPMs. So it's going to spin, and that rotation is going to push the motor towards the passenger seat. So that's your wife, that's your kids, that's whoever's with you. That's who's at the most risk.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how many accidents per year involve the outboard, flipping into the boat? I don't know if the Coast Guard breaks down numbers that.
Yeah, so I don't know an exact number of how many accidents actually flip into the boat, but I do know that I think they say around 5,000 to 6,000 boating accidents per year, with several hundred turning fatal. I know last year, just of the ones that I'm aware of, it happened probably a dozen times at least. That's just the ones that I'm aware of. We actually just talked to a customer yesterday or the day before that it happened to him this past summer. Hit a rock and threw the motor up, and both him and his buddy that was with him ended up in the hospital because of it as well. And that was even on Rainy Lake up in right on the boundary waters, Canada, Minnesota. And so that's more of a natural lake, typically deeper. You don't have to worry about house foundations being out in the middle near as much, and they just hit a rock going down the lake and ended up happening to them.
Yeah. Good Lord. Well, these things happen.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons, that we're at PartsVu excited. We were excited to find you. And we're going to be sharing the Leash more actively with our community, the PartsVu community. But as we start doing that, I know, just based on experience, that this is one of those products that look really simple, Yep. And I know it was really thoughtfully and engineered by experts, people that really know what they're doing. But I know we're going to get a lot of questions. Watch Facebook, watch that space. Where I'll probably be tapping you to help me answer these questions. I know that people out there be thinking, well, I can just create something myself to secure my outboard. I'll use braided cable or whatever the heck people are going to come up with. What are your thoughts, and how do you respond to people that say things like that?
So the common misconception that we get with the Leash is that it's just a rope. It's just a rope. I can go buy a rope at the hardware store and put it around the back of my motor and do it the same. So there's a couple things to that. It's not just a rope. It's actually made out of a material called Vectran, which is a hand-woven material. The manufacturer that we have manufacturing the Leash for us, which is made in America, they actually manufacture all the tethers for the NASCAR, NHRA, IndyCar, all that kind of stuff, the racing industry. And so they're trusting these tethers to hold all the pieces of the car together so that when the car hits the wall going 200 miles an hour, there's not parts of the engine flying up into the stands. There's not wheels flying off. So if you ever watch a NASCAR race and watch a crash, the wheels don't just go flying. And it's all held together by that material that I was calling Vectran, manufactured by the same manufacturer. Even all of the walls in NASCAR. So when the car hits the wall, it absorbs that shock so that the wall doesn't just disintegrate when the car hits it. And that wall is held together by a tether as well, manufactured by the same people. So we've got a durable material. It's rated 5 times stronger than steel. So even if you say, oh, well, I'll just put some sort of cable back there. Well, I mean, this is a very durable product, very strong product. It's not affected by UV. It's not affected by water. Whereas other ropes and stuff, the more it's in the sun, more it's in the water, it's going to break down and get weaker. This isn't like that. So we've also spent so much time engineering it to fit each specific motor. So that's that's one thing. You have to have it so specific. And even the most popular motor right now, the Mercury Pro XS 4-stroke, it has a lot tighter of a, what I'm going to call like the skirt area where it meets up with the lower unit where the leash would sit. So we have to have it a specific length, because if it's too tight, you won't be able to trim your motor up all the way. And if it's too loose, when you trim your motor down, it'll get into the prop. There's not as much of a lip there to grab the leash. So it's a specific length for a reason. We have it to fit all these different makes and models of the motors, all the different horsepowers, everything. We've put the time in to engineer it. And again, it's not just a rope. We've had this tested by Oklahoma State University. They did a test on it to see braking strength of the tethers, if this would help prevent this from happening. And all of their findings were, that it is super strong. The Vectran material is super strong. And then also it can help prevent this from happening.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of time and effort into making sure that this, is something that could potentially help save your life.
Good. Yeah, and you brought up a really good point. So when people purchase the leash, they need to purchase a model or a leash that is specifically designed for their engine, or compatible.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So we've got a couple different models based on what make and model, which we have leashes that pretty much fit all of the most of the popular models out there, from lower horsepower all the way up to 300 horsepower motors. So we've gone through and gotten the specifics on each particular motor. It's basically a custom fit design to each particular motor.
Gotcha. And I know we're working on making sure we're presenting that clearly to folks in PartsVu, just so they can select the right product for their engine, obviously. Good. Yeah. I mean, so we'll be answering this question a lot, Ryan. I guarantee you. People have sort of a lack of respect for physics sometimes.
We get it all the time. We get it all the time where, like I said, it's a common misconception that it's just a rope and they can just go to the hardware store and get a rope or a chain or whatever. Yeah. And the other thing about it is we send a clear protective film that will go on the motor to prevent any paint damage as well. So if you put a chain back there, you're going to end up doing some damage to your motor more than likely. Whereas this is a little bit softer of a material. Plus we send that film with it to protect it. So there's not going to be any damage. And again, if you don't have it just at that specific length, it's either A, going to run into the prop when you trim down, or B, it's going to restrict your motor from trimming up. And that's the leash. You can trim it all the way up. You have full function of the trim from all the way down to all the way up. There's that's another common question is, can I still use all my trim functions? Yes, 100%. You can trim all the way up, all the way down.
Gotcha. That's perfect. I did want to just circle back. I know that the tournament bass fishing community seems to be, really excited and has really embraced the leash. I mean, is that true? And are you seeing other groups of kind of, boating enthusiasts, embracing the leash?
Yeah, so we're starting to see a little bit more and more traction. This is something we've been working on for a few years, and obviously this is a product unlike anything else out there. We compare it to a seatbelt in your vehicle. It took 55 years for the seatbelt to become mandatory equipment in a vehicle. So it's not something that's just going to be accepted right away because people think, oh, well, I don't need a seatbelt in my vehicle. And that's... If you're driving down the road and you say, well, I don't need to wear a seatbelt, I'll just put it on if I'm going to get in an accident. Well, you're not going to have the time to do that. And that's the same thing with this. Accidents happen in a split second. Yeah. So sometimes you don't have time to react to it. So we are seeing more and more people get the leash. We've got several of the professional anglers that are running the leash that want to run the leash. We're not paying them to run the leash or anything. That's just equipment that they want on their boat so that they return home to their families. And they're going all over the country, fishing all these different lakes. And obviously they're very experienced boaters, and it's still happened to people like them.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a baffling conversation to me when you try to convince somebody to wear a seatbelt, or just convince somebody to in this case, use the leash. It just is a really obvious and kind of just makes sense thing to do, in my opinion. But,
absolutely. And you don't even know it's there. You put it on and you don't ever have to look at it again. You don't ever have to do anything to it again. It's there. Mm-hmm. We oftentimes say it's a one-time insurance policy. You buy the leash, you put it on there, you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Well, thanks so much for being here today, Ryan. This was great.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I enjoy talking about this. I mean, even if I wasn't working at Precision Sonar, this is something that I'm super passionate about, just because of all the stories that I've heard over the course of the last few years. Yeah. So it's something I love to fish, and I want to make sure that everybody loves to fish and they don't have a bad memory of going fishing or whatever. They all their memories are positive. They didn't just go catch a whole bunch of fish and then get in an accident and turn a good day of fishing into a bad day. I don't want that to happen.
No, absolutely. Neither do we. I mean, it's a safe day is a fun day.
Exactly.
An unsafe day becomes unfun real quick.
Exactly.
So, PartsVu is proud to carry the leash, and I encourage our listeners to visit PartsVu.com to learn more about the product. I've included a link in the show notes. I also encourage folks to visit PrecisionSonar.com and follow the leash on both Instagram and Facebook. All those links are in the show notes as well. And you guys have a really clever little video that shows the fundamentals of how the leash works. And I've explicitly included that link in the show notes. So thanks again for being here, and stay safe out there, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating podcast. Are you in a dock war with your boating neighbor for the cleanest boat? Check out our marine soaps, polishes, waxes, and more at PartsVu.com. And for free shipping, use the coupon code PVTalksShine, a special perk for our podcast listeners. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for boating knowledge, to keep in touch with the PartsVu community, and for special sales and promotions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and check out the show notes for the coupon code just mentioned, more information about PartsVu and the products we offer, as well as our boating blog, the PartsVu Xchange. And a big thanks to Mind for performing the original music featured within this podcast.